Hey, Tommy from the Run Testers. In this video, we're going to be doing a comparison of the Brooks Glycerin 22 and the Saucony Triumph 22. Let's dive in. The Brooks Glycerin 22 costs £165 or $165. It weighs 297 grams or 10.5 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 10mm. The Saucony Triumph 22 costs £170 or $160. It weighs 306 grams or 10.8 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 10mm. The Brooks Glycerin line has long been a go-to for runners looking for a good balance of comfort, cushioning and stability. The Glycerin 22 continues those aspects of the shoe but features a few updates to improve the ride. The biggest of those is an updated midsole made from the brand's new DNA tuned foam, the same used in the Brooks Glycerin Max, that combines larger foam cells in the heel for softer landings and smaller cells in the forefoot for increased energy at toe-off. The shoe also features a new engineered double jacketed knit upper to improve the comfort and fit, as well as a thick layer of outsole rubber to improve grip and durability. The Saucony Triumph 22 sees some major updates to the line. The biggest of those is a new PWRRUN PB foam midsole, a PEBA-based material replacing the PWRRUN Plus found in the Triumph 21, that aims to improve cushioning, energy return and responsiveness. The same foam is used in the Saucony Endorphin Pro 4 and Speed 4. There's also an updated upper that's designed to be even plusher and more comfortable than its predecessor, and a noticeably wider base across the full length of the shoe to improve stability. On the outsole, there's a generous layer of rubber to provide grip and protect the midsole foam.
Comes to the fit of the two shoes, I've got my normal UK 9, which is a US 10 for both these brands. That is the size I generally get with both Brooks and Saucony, and the two shoes do fit me very well in that size. They're pretty roomy in the toe box. I think the Saucony's a little bit roomier in that area. I potentially could have gone for a smaller size in the Saucony, but I think it would have been less comfortable for a shoe like this, which I would line up mainly for those easy miles when a bit more room in the toe box is probably what I want. I don't want a dialed in fit for that. And then you've got really very comfortable back ends of the shoes here with lots of cushioning around the heel collar and on the tongue, to create that great step in feel. They're shoes that are definitely much built for comfort, and they've also got a lot of stability at the back of the shoe with big internal heel counters on them that can be quite rigid, but they haven't bothered my Achilles, and sometimes these kind of heel counters do. I've been okay with both of these shoes. So overall I would stick to your normal running shoe size. You've got a pretty similar fit to what you'll have with previous models of the shoe and other models within the Saucony and Brooks ranges.
Quick word on fit then, and I ran in my regular running shoe size in both of these, which is a UK 8.5. I would describe the fit as really quite similar overall. You've got nice plush padded heel collars that hold well. They support the heels really nicely. Padded tongues, a bit more padding on the Glycerin 22, a little bit less on the Triumph 22, but overall the feel and the wrap and the comfort on the foot is the same. There's a plushness to both of them and they feel really nice and disappearing. You've got a nice room in the toe box on the Triumph 22, maybe a little bit, there's good length there. Get similar amount into the Glycerin, maybe just a slightly less. It's a bit more structured up the toe box here as well. So that sort of holds that off the top of the toe as well. In terms of the way you've got back into the toe knuckles here, I would say it's a little bit more snug into the Triumph 22, holds a little bit more securely, not tight, just comfortable, nice secure fit. You get a bit more flex here into the Glycerin 22. So if you like that sort of flexy upper, you're going to get a little bit less structure, a little bit more wiggle here from that. But overall, both shoes I thought were great, true to size, and that is how I would recommend them.
Okay, so the fit for me in these two shoes, very, very similar. I definitely stay to my size in both of these shoes. There's loads of padding on them. There's plenty of space in the forefoot. They're not overly lean shoes when it comes to width, so they're pretty comfortable for people with fairly average width feet. They're generally very similar shoes in how they fit. They're basically designed for accessibility, so a lot of focus has been put into making sure that these shoes have a nice, comfortable fit for anybody who will be looking for this sort of shoe. So yeah, I definitely stay to my UK size 8 in both of these shoes.
So in testing, I've run 50k plus in both of these shoes. I've put them through a good range of paces on the roads and some light off-road river paths. I've also done a side-by-side mile to tease out the similarities and the differences when you've got them on the foot. And for me, there's quite a lot similar here. You've got similarly plush uppers, similar fit security, you've got quite similar stability from a cushioned ride that has a bit of stiffness, firmness to it. I think that these shoes can largely cater for similar types of runs as well. They're as happy as each other, certainly at the slower end of things. The big difference is that the Triumph 22 this one here, gets there with a marginally higher stack. I noticed the extra in the heel, particularly on this shoe. The Glycerin 22, by contrast, feels a little bit more low profile, a bit more direct. It's a bit more agile. For me, the Glycerin 22 is the more versatile shoe. It's like nicely balanced between cushion and energy. And I like where Brooks is going with the new DNA-tuned foam. Now, for the Glycerin 22, it isn't really like a Dill Nimbus 27 soft, and fans of that really soft ride might find that they want more cush or more stack for their easiest of runs. But I still think it's plenty soft, and I'll happily trade some of the top-level plushness underfoot for a shoe that can go up through the gears. Glycerin 22 definitely offers that. I think Brooks has made a good, dependable daily trainer. Now, the Triumph 22, I think, is also very competent, but it hasn't impressed me as much, perhaps as the Triumph 21. I'm not in love with this generation. It now feels softer, a bit more squidgy, it's a bit more laboured, it feels a bit heavier on the foot. So I think it's lost some of the sprightliness that gave the Triumph 21 a bit more versatility and range. That's kind of gone, and to me it now feels much more like an easy run shoe only, or at least I find it a bit harder work when you try and move to the upper paces. You know, it's a decent easy day shoe and I can cruise in it perfectly comfortably, but I found I wanted a bit more pop, a bit more energy for anything kind of above sort of cruising pace.
Okay, so these are two shoes that have developed quite a lot over the past few versions of them. The Triumph and Glycerin lines, if you go back about 5 years, they would be classed as the big max cushion shoes that the brand has. So the shoes designed for easy runs, recovery runs, maybe easy longer runs. But they were very much the big max stack shoe that those brands had. They're not anymore. They're both Saucony and Brooks are releasing shoes like the Brooks Glycerin Max that are significantly chunkier. So these shoes have developed over the last few years to be more like cushion daily shoes, designed for the average runner that just wants to pick up a pair of shoes for everything, or designed for people in a river rotation that are looking for a daily shoe that really focuses more on that sort of cushion side of things. They over the past few iterations, my enjoyment of both of these shoes has varied a little bit. I tended to opt for the Saucony Triumph range over the past two versions. So the 20 and 21 were two of my favourite cushion daily shoes out there. They just did everything I wanted to do. They were the sort of shoe that you could take on holiday and it would just work perfectly. Nice, comfortable shoe to run in for easy runs, a little bit more in the midsole so that you could pick up the pace a little bit in it. Not loads, but they weren't the most versatile shoe in the world, but they could do a bit more. So I really liked both of those versions of the shoe, and I talked about those in quite a lot of videos. The Brooks Glycerin 20 and 21, same, very, very solid shoes, slightly more stable, verging more on the stable side of the shoes. So I would say that the reason why I liked the last two versions of the Triumph more is just a little bit more versatile, whereas the Brooks Glycerin is just an all-round sturdy workhorse shoe, very comfortable, good durability, just good all round really, for those sorts of general runs and daily runs. So in the most recent versions, that has changed quite a lot in the Triumph. So the Triumph 22 has an updated midsole foam in it, and it doesn't work for me. I use this shoe quite a bit. I actually ran London Marathon in this shoe a week after running Boston Marathon, and I chose to run it in the Triumph 22 because I only wanted to cross the finish line in comfort. I wanted a shoe that would just feel fine. I wasn't planning on getting a fast time or anything in it. I didn't. I got a really bad time because I'd just done a marathon the week before. But I just really didn't enjoy it for that run. I think the main reason is this midsole. It feels quite blocky to me. The heel-toe transition doesn't work very well for me. I hit the shoe on the midsole, the midsection of the shoe, and it just doesn't seem to roll me forward in any way. It just sort of hits the ground and then I'm picking it up again. So there's no real smooth transition for me in the shoe, which I really got from the 20 and 21, and also no real energy return from the midsole. I think that's a similar case with a lot of people with this shoe, especially people who've run it in the previous versions of the Triumph. I do know people do like this shoe, and I think it might be because of where people are landing. I think Nick gets a better experience from the shoe than I do, and also I think this midsole's bit denser than was in the previous two Triumphs, so it might work better if you're maybe a heavier runner as well. But for me, it's a shoe that doesn't really work. I don't get a lot out of this shoe. Easy runs fine, but even easy runs, it just doesn't quite work for me because I don't really get a nice smooth action. I still want a nice heel to toe transition when I'm going out for an easy run, and I just don't get it from the Triumph 22. It just feels a little bit solid to me, and like I'm not getting anything back. I'm not getting any assistance to help me with the run. The Glycerin 22 is better than that. So It has had an updated midsole in it, so this DNA tuned is now in here. It's the same one used in the Brooks Glycerin Max. It's not a massive change to me from the previous versions of the shoe. It's still quite an all-round balanced midsole. It's not particularly bouncy. It's very stable. Brooks shoes are very stable. In fact, both of these shoes are very stable shoes to run in, which is a big plus point for a lot of people, especially if you're a beginner or somebody who's just looking for general running and you want a bit of everything in your shoe. But for me, the Brooks Glycerin 22 is just a little bit more to it. I find it to be an easier shoe to run in over easy runs and recovery runs. I think it would be a fine shoe for longest training if you were running at a consistent pace and not running quickly. So if you're training for a marathon and you were going up to 32k, 34k, but you're doing it for the distance, I think this would be a very comfortable training shoe for that, and you get that stability in, which is really beneficial if you're training long distance and your legs are getting tired. So there's a lot of plus points to using the Brooks Glycerin 22. Neither of these shoes are wow shoes. They're not shoes that you're going to get loads of energy return from, loads of bounce. They're not shoes that particularly do anything outside of being good, solid shoes. So it really comes down to that ride for me, and I think for me it's just that heel to toe transition. I think the foams are actually relatively similar. The Glycerin 22 probably just has a bit more to that foam, but I just don't get a nice ride out of the Triumph 22, whereas the Glycerin 22 is just a solid, comfortable ride. The sort of shoe that you put on and by the end of the run you don't really think about the shoe. The shoe was fine. It just helped you through that run, and it did the job. Whereas the Triumph 22 doesn't feel like it's doing that, and I do think about the shoe when it's on my feet, thinking that it's not really helping me. The outsole on these shoes, very good on both of these, really, really good outsoles. Triumph 22 has a solid layer of this outsole rubber, and it really does a good job. It's quite thick rubber, it's got a good tread on it, no issues at all on any ground. I've used this on public footpaths and things like that. Very good outsole. Same goes for the Glycerin 22, really thick, solid layer of outsole rubber on this shoe, and definitely one designed for durability, but also really good grip on all surfaces basically. And again, I run down public footpaths quite a lot in this shoe as well, so solid outsole on both of these shoes.
Glycerin 22 and the Triumph 22 are both big cushion shoes built to be the premium daily trainers within each of their brands ranges. They've got pretty high price tags, loads of cushioning underfoot, lots of exciting foams used in the midsole as well to try and create livelier rides for what are primarily comfortable shoes to use for daily training. Neither shoes exactly floats my boat as shoes that I'd rush to have in my own rotation. I tend to prefer slightly lighter shoes or more rocket shoes, but they both do a really good job, certainly of protecting the legs and eating up easy miles and keeping you comfortable and protected on those runs. Triumph 22 was the shoe that we had in first, and it's fair to say it was a little bit of a disappointment. Like, it's moved away from what the classic Triumph looked like, which actually is a lot more like the Brooks Glycerin 22. You've got more of a max cushion shoe here with a big stack of foam, and in particular a wider base and more features geared to increase the stability of the shoe. But given that it does have PWRRUN PB in the midsole, we did still hope we get a nice lively ride out of the Triumph 22, given that the Triumph 21 was one of the more versatile cushion shoes I'd say on the market, but that hasn't really been my experience on the run. Now, it's certainly a comfortable shoe. It's really soft at the heel where I land, and transition isn't too bad onto the forefoot, but it's not a very smooth transition, and you don't really get a lot of life out of the foam when you do come off the toes. I find it has a very dense feeling, this foam, and actually pushing into it, I feel like you have to work really hard to try and get stuff out of it. So maybe it's the kind of shoe that would feel a lot better if you're a heavier runner or someone who puts a bit more force into the shoe with the way you run, maybe more of a loping gait. But I found I just wasn't really making much of an imprint on this midsole, and I just wasn't getting a lot back from it as a result. And that's at all paces. It's not a shoe that I'd consider very good for fast runs, obviously, because of the weight and the fact the midsole doesn't feel that lively. But even at easy paces, I'd like to get a little bit more back from my shoes. I feel like they're working with me a bit more rather than being just a big old wedge of foam on the end of my foot, protecting the legs on easy runs, which the Triumph does very well. But like I say, it doesn't really have enough life to it for me. Whereas the Glycerin 22 sticks much more to the design of its previous models in the line, where Brooks, instead of increasing the stability features of the Glycerin and whacking up the stack height, they just made a different shoe and brought out the Glycerin Max and even the Brooks Ghost Max 2, which have a bit more of those properties. Whereas the Glycerin 22 sticks much more to its classic daily trainer feel with that 10mm drop. Still certainly a really comfortable feel at the heel, but you have got a nimbler feeling shoe compared to the Triumph, a more sprightly one. It's got, I think, a better midsole foam. So this dual density DNA midsole foam is designed to give you that soft feel at the heel and then a little bit more of a responsive feel as you roll through onto your forefoot. And it's not the liveliest shoe in the world. Again, this is a shoe that I position as an easy day shoe, a shoe for daily miles, long runs rather than speed training, but it has more life to it than the Triumph 22 if you are going to go out and do some fast running in it, for sure. It is a lighter shoe than the Triumph on paper, and actually on the run it feels a lot lighter. I would say that the balance of the shoe is better, the foam, it feels just a lot poppier and less dense than the stuff on the Triumph, and as a result just ticking over at any pace just feels a bit more easy and natural for me in the Glycerin 22. So while both shoes really aimed, I think, to create a mix of comfort and responsiveness, I think the Brooks Glycerin 22 just does it a lot better. It feels like a cushioned daily trainer, a shoe that you could recommend to runners who only use one shoe because it does have a bit more life to it. And if they want to primarily have a comfortable shoe, you can then also use the Glycerin 22 for tempo runs, fast runs, and even long races, whereas the Triumph 22 feels like it's now firmly in the Easy Day shoebox, the Max Cushion Cruiser box, and not necessarily a bad thing, but it's different to how the Triumphs were in the past. The Glycerin's more in line with those, and that's the feeling I prefer on the run, looking at these kind of cushion shoes.
So my verdict on these two shoes, quite easy because I really don't get on with the Triumph 22. So it's going to be the Brooks Glycerin 22 for me all the way. Although I think that's not necessarily the case for everyone. I think it just doesn't work. The Triumph 22 just doesn't work for my running style. But I think they are very similar shoes all out now. I think the only difference really is that heel to toe transition, which I don't get from the Triumph 22. It just, where I land just doesn't work on this shoe. Glycerin 22, absolutely fine, feels comfortable. No issues at all with it. And I do think the DNA tuned midsole has got a little bit more to it. It's not the bounciest foam in the world, but I think there's a bit more energy return in it, and there's a little bit more softness in this midsole foam to make it a more enjoyable ride. So I definitely go for the Glycerin 22 if I was using, well, for any types of run basically, because the Triumph 22 doesn't work for me.
So my verdict is I would get the Brooks Glycerin 22 out of these two shoes. I just enjoy the ride more at all paces. It has a lighter feel, a more sprightly feel. I think you've got a more responsive foam in the midsole when you don't sacrifice really anything on comfort. You've got a lovely comfortable feel in this shoe, both in terms of the upper and the foam underfoot. And then you just have a nimbler feeling shoe that just feels more natural for me to run in at any pace. If you are all in on big, wide, stable, cushy shoes, then the Triumph 22 is that, but it hasn't really got a particularly soft feel and squishy feel. Like, it is soft at the heel for sure, but like I say, it's quite a dense foam. And as I mentioned in the run test, if you are a heavier runner, you might just awaken more life out of this shoe than I ever been able to. But I think the Glycerin 22 will serve you just as well on that front, because it is really comfortable, and I do think the foam just has a bit more about it in terms of creating a more enjoyable feel on runs of any pace. So I'd get the Glycerin 22 if I was picking between these.
Verdict then, well, there's not a huge amount to choose between these two shoes, and I think they can cover largely the same runs. The comfort on the foot is about equal, similar on weight, although I think the Glycerin 22 certainly sort of handles that weight a bit better. It feels a bit lighter on the foot, feels a bit more nimble, it's a bit more agile. The Triumph 22, I think you feel that bigger stack, and it's sort of a shade softer. So if you're chasing the softest, most protective shoe, maybe the Triumph 22 is going to be your preferred shoe. The Glycerin, by contrast, feels a little bit flatter, it feels lower profile, but it does feel a bit livelier, a bit more agile. And I think that makes for a more versatile and bigger pace range as a result. So if I'm picking between these two shoes, I think the Glycerin 22 edges this one. It's got comfort and cushion for the slowest miles, but it can shift up the gears a bit better, I think, than the Triumph 22. It's also a bit cheaper, so that's the shoe I'd choose. But if you like the feel of a bigger cushion, you want a bit of a bigger stack, then the Triumph 22 feels like more of the shoe in that kind of market, so it might be well worth a look if that's what your preference is.
That's it from us on this Versus. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and click that little bell. And if you're going to catch them below, you can find a link to our podcast, which comes out a couple of times each month. Thanks a lot for watching. Catch you next time.